Our guest is an independent producer, seasoned entertainment executive and investor. She's currently the head of distribution for Buffalo8. She started her career at 20th Century Fox, working in feature film development and production on projects handling The Maze Runner and Ford versus Ferrari. She's produced multiple projects, including Latino thriller Coyote Lake, starring Camila Mendez and Adriana Barraza. In 2017, she helped launch the distribution arm of GDE by bringing in the Oscar-nominated Van Gogh biopic, Loving Vincent. She's overseen the release of over 100 films. Our guest today is our friend, the one and only Nikki Stier Justice. Digital Dilemmas is a Link Media original podcast. Our guest today is our friend, the one and only Nikki Stier Justice. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you for making the time. I know you're really busy these days, so thanks for joining us.
So our guests have sort of run a wide spectrum, but you're the first person that we've had on from the entertainment industry. And is that true? That's true, right?
So far, it's true, yes. Nikki's the first.
I feel like we did talk to somebody. Oh, I feel like we did talk to somebody about the writer's strike, but anyway. So I would love to know how I know that there was obviously an agreement reached to go back to work after the strike, but a lot of that was sort of around AI and the use of technology in the industry. How do you see it working moving forward? Also, were you affected by the strike?
So, in some ways, because the company I work for, Buffalo8 and Bonded, they are kind of a fully functioning studio. So they do debt lending for bigger films, like ones that Universal and Lionsgate are putting out, and independent productions, post-production, payroll. So all of those divisions were affected. Distribution, not so much. So we were still acquiring and distributing films as usual. I have feelings about the strikes, and like just in general, my frustration with Hollywood is that the divide between studio projects and independent projects has never been greater. And when they went in for the strike, they're looking out for the best interests for a select number of members, and not necessarily the majority. And I think there's a huge misunderstanding as far as what independent films generate as far as revenue. And part of that is because we have subscription-based services like Netflix coming in, paying obscene numbers for talent, and then they expect on the indie side, if you want to secure those names, to be paying the same. And indie films are just not, and even series are not generating what they used to. And so for me, like part of my business is trying to create a sustainable business model for the independents. And I don't necessarily think that the guilds or the studios particularly care about the independents, which is really frustrating, because that's where all of this talent is coming from. It's being sourced, and if they are no longer able to create, or they get investors and it's just a one-off opportunity, it's not sustainable, and it becomes a hobby rather than a business. And that's when you get content that is not of the quality and caliber that we're hoping for.
Right. Like I've traditionally thought of of independent filmmaking as almost like the incubator, like where the really creative, outside of the box, the magic happens.
Exactly.
And the geniuses are discovered, and then sort of move on, and some of their talent or their quirkiness or whatever made them different, and it sort of comes into the mainstream.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the challenge with film in particular is you're constantly having to look at it using two different lenses. It's like the business lens and the creative lens, and more often than not, they're at odds with each other. And so, from a financing standpoint, a lot of our filmmakers will be like, okay, well, what cast names have value, and what could we potentially sell internationally or get a domestic deal? And unfortunately, those are the names that are just being paid an obscene amount of money. Like, you have these Mel Gibson films where he works for 3 days, gets paid 3 million, and the rest of the budget is 300,000. So like there's that huge disconnect there, and it's not creating the quality material that we're looking for. And unfortunately, most of our international partners have really moved away from putting any money into independence on the production side. And so when we're casting, we're actually looking at, what kind of following does this talent have, and what are the engagement levels if they're not a name that is easily recognizable, and how do we leverage that when it's time to distribute and release the film, which most directors are not wanting to think about. Like, they just want to cast whoever creatively is the best choice.
I have another question, John. I'm sorry for hijacking this.
No, go.
Hijacking this.
You're not
episode.
hijacking anything. Go ahead.
I feel like there was an era, like a magical era for independent filmmaking, when the advances in technology made it possible for so many more people to make sort of higher quality productions, and it was almost like it opened the door to a lot of people because the costs went down. You didn't need all of the prohibitively expensive equipment or post-production costs necessarily to create something that was of high quality. But it seems like that has ended, and technology is no longer like an ally of the independent film culture business. I don't know.
I think anytime that the barrier to entry becomes lower, you're going to immediately be faced with oversaturation, which is exactly what happened. So you're right, like it became easier than ever to make films, and I actually think for independents, like there's really cool technology that we will hopefully be able to use, depending on if there's going to be limitations put in place with the guild. And again, like that's a frustration that I have, because I understand the need to protect certain roles, but I also understand how challenging it is to make an independent film. And I think we're going to be faced with more instances where the crew is getting smaller and the filmmaking team is going to have to get more creative in terms of how they leverage technology in innovative ways. But I think the biggest obstacle that my filmmakers are facing right now is the oversaturation, and a lot of consumers, particularly during the pandemic, they just stopped renting and buying movies. And we saw at the same time a huge spike in AVOD, which is ad-based revenue. So Tubi, Pluto, Freevee, even YouTube, anytime those ads pop up, they're paid based off of the length of the views and the number of views. And so we saw a huge spike in those numbers for certain titles, but that transactional revenue, that was kind of that first pay one window. It's when you're doing all the big publicity around the film, and it's really setting up the momentum for the next decade for a title. Like it's helping secure placement and triggering certain algorithms. That window has declined significantly for our filmmakers, in the way that DVD revenue really declined. Like that used to be a huge source of revenue for independent film. And so like that's in the business where we're trying to scramble is, okay, where can we generate the most revenue to help recoup these production budgets, and how do you get it seen with all this noise. And so that those have been by far the biggest challenges that have emerged, especially the last 2 years, where a lot of the tactics and strategies that we used to use for marketing and releasing movies are just no longer relevant. It doesn't work. I mean, we've had filmmakers who have spent a lot of money on paid ads that generated hundreds of thousands of clicks, and that did not translate into conversions. And I think that's just part of the change that we've seen in consumption habits, where people just aren't renting and buying anymore, at least not the independents.
I think what you say though holds true even for more mainstream content. John, I feel like you were saying the other day, I forget what we were watching, but I think we were looking for like a new show to watch or something, and I gave John a list of like, here are 10 shows that are, and John's like, I've literally never heard of a single one of these. Like, and he's like, I don't live under a rock. Like, I watch television. I'm out there. I'm on the interwebs. Like and it's because I feel like in part it's because of the sheer volume of content that is being pushed out through all of these various channels that it's overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So along those lines, Nikki, I wanted to ask you, since you do this every day, there are so many channels and platforms, and I swear there's more every week.
There are.
Right? I mean, if you get a new Roku stick or you get a new device to plug in it, or you have a new smart TV, I find more free channels with, and then there's live options. And yesterday I went just for funsies, jumped on Roku Live TV, 700 channels. And that's just one of 30 options I have if I wanted to choose Netflix, Hulu, all the others. And I began thinking, where are we going here? Where are we going? Because this can't be good.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's too many options for sure. And I do think that there's opportunities for the more niche platforms to break out in a meaningful way, where it's like, if you are specifically drawn to this type of content, and we've seen that with, like, there's a platform called Reverie that does a lot of our LGBTQ content, and like that's really good because
sense.
they're
Right.
curating it, and we can take our titles to them, and we know we can get the higher CPMs. But the problem is, like, most of these platforms, you're starting a platform from scratch. Customer acquisition and customer retention is really expensive, and and at the same time, when you're starting these new platforms, you're typically paying licensing fees, or you're looking at doing a rev share model with library content, but you're kind of doing this like quick grab to try to get as much content as possible. And for us as distributors, I'm always looking to give these platforms a chance and an opportunity, but it's also, we're having to put together the metadata, we're having to get them all of the assets. Like it's a lot of work for us that doesn't necessarily translate into revenue. Like some of these platforms that I've worked with for a couple of years now, and they're generating like a couple $100 a quarter, and it's not worth it for us. So, and then they disappear after a year.
Right,
so you're like,
right.
All right. So I mean, I think where there's opportunity is like partnering with those niche platforms, doing more of an exclusive, where it's like, this is the exact audience that I'm trying to reach for this title, particularly for independents. But yeah, I mean, we get, I'd say every other week we're getting messages from new platforms that they're like, hey, we want to license some content, and you're having to kind of figure out who's legit, who's not. And usually my first question is like, okay, can you send over a template licensing deal? And they're like, well, we don't have one. I'm like, okay, come back when you do. If you haven't done the legal part yet, then I'm not going to waste my time.
I
Well, I
feel like,
noticed.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Amber.
Well, I feel like it's like when, and I'm gonna horribly date myself here, but when like it was either VHS or Betamax or even Blu-ray or whatever the other one was, I can't even remember now.
Just DVDs, yeah.
Just HD DVD or whatever. Except instead of two, you have 400 and you have to figure out which one to put your money on or behind in your case.
Yeah.
Nikki, are we in a place where, if I asked you what was an emerging trend, are we in a place where we don't have a trend right now? You're just waiting for one? You're trying to figure the trends out? Like, it seems like we're in the Wild West right now.
Yeah, I mean, so there's been certain titles that have done really well during the pandemic, and I'd say number one on that list is content from Black filmmakers targeting a Black audience. So, traditionally the business would categorize that as urban. What we've seen is like the thrillers, action, more female skewing, does really well on platforms like Tubi, and those are ones where the business model just makes sense. Like we have filmmakers who come in and they're able to recoup their production budgets within the first year of release. And a lot of their strategy, like they will do some paid ads, but it's a lot of influencers or Facebook groups that have carved
Like
out
more
their niche
organic
within
kind of.
within this
Yeah.
community, and they're like, all right, we just tap into them on each release, and like that's a model that's really working well right now. I think the challenge is for a lot of the other content out there, like documentaries are struggling, like really well made dramas that are coming out of the festivals, like they're underperforming. We're not getting licensing deals, and so we're at this point, like every time there's a huge shift in the industry, which it usually happens every decade, but we're seeing it like much more frequently now with the new digital landscape. But every time that this happens, we see a pretty steep decline in revenue from one source that has traditionally generated a significant amount, but then you see a new one emerging. And so like AVOD is picking up and it's covering some of the difference, but it's not the full amount that we used to see because SVOD licensing deals and transactional revenue just made up a significant amount. So I do think as far as like the future of the entertainment industry, advertisers are going to have a huge role in that. So we're already seeing it with ad-based revenue, but I think we're going to see it even more so with advertisers wanting to align with these films that are targeting a very specific audience that aligns with that brand. And there's actually some really cool AI technology that I've been shown and that we're trying to incorporate into some of our releases, where they come in after a film has been completed, that we pitch to a brand. So a perfect example, we had this movie called Diamond in the Rough. We were talking with a golf club manufacturer about coming in, and if we did the licensing deal with them, we would use the AI technology to swap out all of the golf clubs to have their logo on them. And then that licensing deal is for like 2 years, and then you can shop it to other golf club manufacturers after that window.
That's amazing.
I think, yeah,
that's something. And go ahead.
It's very much ahead of its time. Like I know the company is kind of struggling a little bit right now, and I think there's huge opportunity there in the independent space, and so much of the focus is on these huge brands and huge films, but you have to think about like who are they trying to target, and you can have such a specific, such a niche audience that will be able to see it. So it's not even product placement, it's actual like brand integration into these films, and I think that is very much the future and what I'm looking forward to most.
It's like you were reading my mind, because literally my next question was, are you leveraging AI yet? And if you are, where? So you're already ahead of me here in the conversation.
I have a related
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking for that with some of these post applications, with marketing, like we'll look to work with AI, like even just like so key art can be such a pain because the filmmakers will deliver a PSD file and it's just in the dimensions of a movie poster, but like Apple needs banner ads and you need all of these extensions. And so like AI has been amazing in just like extending an image that used to take much longer. So there's definitely some efficiencies, and we're always looking for ways to incorporate it to make our lives easier. I wouldn't say AI is taking over any of the creative jobs within our division. I think it's more like how does AI help make our lives easier and allow us to focus on the things that are going to generate the most revenue for our filmmakers.
That was sort of my question. I am also old enough to remember in the news business when we switched to digital editing, and it was a huge shift. And it was the unions got involved, and people who were not familiar with the new technology were in a complete panic. It was sort of in a microcosm, like similar to what's happening today with the whole AI issue. And now we can't imagine a world with where you don't edit on your laptop or on your phone, or and
Yeah.
and so I guess I wanted to ask, I feel like technology, AI, or just technology in general, has sort of been cast as the villain in the entertainment industry. And I have to imagine that there are other roles or other ways to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that is true to a lot of things about the entertainment industry. I mean, it was very interesting being someone who has worked at a major film studio. Started my career at 20th Century Fox, and then to go into the independent space, but to read consumers' opinions about the strike and what was going on, and wanting to demand more in terms of content that speaks directly to them, but also not realizing like that they're the ones that are directly influencing the content that's being made. And it's like there's a reason that the Mel Gibson action films continue to be sold for millions of dollars, because people continue to consume that content. And so everyone wants to point their fingers at executives and producers and financiers, and it's like the end of the day, they're having to balance the business and the creative. And the business side of things, they're looking at what consumers are watching and who they're watching, and they're all trying to keep their jobs as well. So it's challenging, and I think that speaks to technology as well. Like I said before, we don't want technology to be replacing jobs, but right now these independent productions can't afford those jobs anyway. Like if you're trying to make this small indie film, you can't afford to have a full VFX and post team. And so if you're able to use this technology to bring your vision to life, like that's really exciting. And so I'm definitely like I'm being pulled from both sides, because like as a producer and a creative, and like I've worked with all of those people on sets, and I want them to have to earn a livable wage. And I think that the entertainment industry and the film distribution model has been broken for a while. And there's the challenges that we've had new players emerge like Netflix and like Amazon, where their sole goal is not recouping these budgets. It's growing their subscriber base. And so they're able to make these flops and balance them with other successes. And so they're like we're trying to apply a blanket approach to an industry that has so many different tiers just from a revenue generation standpoint and what they're trying to accomplish, that it just doesn't make sense. And no one's kind of addressing that, like they all need to be treated separately. And instead they're like, okay, we're going to combine all aggregators, all distributors, all studios into this one pie.
People are looking for
they,
a one size fits all answer
exactly
solution to this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nikki, you've taught in the classroom, and as you know, I teach now. Based on what you said, if you were talking to students today, you would definitely encourage them to learn AI tools.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, we talked about this, John. Like I always think it's so important to, if you're entering the entertainment industry, you need to understand tech, and you need to be able to understand how that's going to influence your role in this space over the years. Like you do have to look ahead. I think it's so important that you have an understanding of business, and I think thinking and approaching the entertainment industry with a business mindset, you're automatically going to be looking at the future and how that's going to influence your career path. And I think so many programs and so many instructors, like I experienced it firsthand, like they're focusing on just the production and just the creative. And then so many filmmakers, like they finish and they're like, now what? And they're only halfway there, but they don't realize like what are the outlets, who are the audiences I'm going to be targeting if I'm self-distributing this, and what's that approach, and how will that change over the years. So I think having a business mindset is so important in any industry, but especially something like the entertainment industry.
Yeah, a lot of my students have been asking me that, especially this year. And I think it's because there's a little bit of pushback from some parents, maybe from some teachers, that
A little
AI.
bit.
Yeah, well, I'm being kind. I'm being kind.
Don't be kind, be honest. There's been a ton of pushback.
Some people are it's just, I'm
People
old
are
enough where
terrified.
I've seen all these changes. People get scared,
Yeah.
and they think AI is the next thing to be scared about. And I'm all for the ethics. I'm a big proponent of ethical use and making sure you follow all the regulations and
Making sure there are
passing
regulations.
guidelines. So I'm all for that. I'm a big proponent of it. Having said that, though, unless we're out there using it, then you're missing the boat. You're going to miss out on jobs. You're going to miss out on opportunities. You're going to miss out on competitiveness for your business. You're not going to be able to combat misinformation against the bad guys. We've got to be out there using these tools. So I think some of the students, literally, and I mean this, they've been a little hesitant to use the tool. I have to actually openly encourage them to use it and then share with me how they used it, show me their prompts, their conversations. Let's get better at it. What did it do well? What did it not do well? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I
why
would
do you
think
say
the
that?
students, well, I would just think the students would embrace it in a much bigger way. Like I would expect more
I thought they
pushback
would too. And
from
I think they
faculty,
are
but
now, but I thought so too.
You should have seen my kids when my kids started this school
Right.
year. And remember, we were talking about they're 15 and 17. They're in high school, and we were talking about AI, and we were in the car, and I said, "Well, are you guys using it? You guys should, you should both be using it in your academics." And their faces, their eyes went like this, like they were like, "That's not what our teachers say. That's not like it was like
Wow.
that has changed. I will, to give credit where it's due, the schools and the teachers have definitely changed their approach over this, even just the one semester. It was very impressive, but that first reaction was it was like they were shocked to hear a grown-up or a parent or whatever say, learn how to use this tool, embrace it. It's a tool. This is happening. This is going to happen whether we like it or not. So learn how to use it.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
like
Nikki.
it's like running a race barefoot, and then all of a sudden someone gives you sneakers, and you're like, I don't
I don't
know.
know. Is it cheating?
No one else is
Am I
using the
cheating? No one else.
sneakers,
I
but
don't know.
yeah, exactly.
It kind of is. I spoke at a couple prep schools over the winter, and I would say about 80% of the faculty was all on board with this, but there was, there's good 20-30% that thought it was cheating. And then they recited all the negative effects of AI, bias, hallucinations, et cetera, that AI, large language models can do. But when we finally in the conversation got to the place where here's how you can teach it ethically, here's how you can use it so that the kids can actually learn quicker and then become more humane with their critical thinking skills. Then we started to see a little change, but the first reaction was like, no, no, no.
To use Nikki's analogy, just from like an ethical perspective and an accessibility perspective, you got to make sure everybody has access to the sneakers. Like you can't just give sneakers to the rich white kids and expect AI to develop in an ethical, diverse, equally representative manner.
And we talk about that.
Yeah.
It's been pretty cool, Nikki. We've actually done some exercises in the classroom where if you came back in the classroom, you would notice a big difference in something that maybe you taught that was three classes long, an assignment. They can get it done now in one class.
Yeah.
Just like you in the workplace, they can go get this information rather quickly. And that changes how you teach, just like it changes how we work. Okay, now that we've saved time, how do we use that time?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great thing. Like one of the biggest shifts I saw during the pandemic was in the entertainment industry was when we all first started working remotely. People were just like, I have 2 free hours a day because I'm not stuck commuting in Los Angeles. And so I'm taking my dog for walks and I'm just getting some fresh air and I just feel more human and feel like I can actually do this thing. And then as the pandemic went on and most people stayed remote, those 2 hours started getting filled with work instead of leisure time. And now I talk to my colleagues and like it doesn't matter if I'm talking to a small independent producer or like I'll talk to my point at Amazon and they're like, yeah, I had 3 team members laid off and no one replaced them. So now I'm taking on their workload and they're like everyone is just struggling for air and struggling to handle this bandwidth and so I think if there are any things from my perspective that I can have removed from my plate because of AI to allow me to just like take a step back, breathe and focus on what's important in this industry, like that's a win for me. And I think for a lot of people in this industry.
100%. Because if something took you 8 hours to do 2 years ago, and now you can get it done in 1 hour. Now you have 7 hours. So maybe you have more work to do and you can do some interesting work or creative work you couldn't have done before in those 8 hours. But then you also have another couple hours to maybe be more human, maybe take care of your kids better, do an errand, or just breathe, go outside and just be a better human. There's advantages to this if we learn how to use it properly, ethically, etc.
The flip side of
Yeah.
it, and I think this is what Nikki was alluding to, I think, is that it was like once we realized you could work from anywhere,
Yeah.
it sort of took a while, but then everybody realized, oh, that means we can be working all the
We
time.
can do more.
We can, there's no end to the workday, because there's no, you never leave anywhere and and go home. You are home all the time. So it became easier, I think, for people's jobs and work to sort of take over their whole lives.
Well, and I think when we're looking at AI, it's so important to look at it as a tool for your job and not a threat for your job. So it's like, it's easy to see AI and immediately think like, oh, is it going to replace me? And it's like, it's just going to help you accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. And if you embrace it, because the reality is, even like if I need a movie poster design, and that's something that my husband does frequently, like I'll approach him. I don't know the prompts to give AI to generate the poster I want. Like I'll tell him like, this is the idea I'm thinking of, and then he'll use AI to generate 20 different layouts. And sometimes we'll go through all of those and I'm like, no, none of that works. That's something that would have taken a couple of weeks to create 10 different mock-ups for a movie poster, to get them all rejected and then go back to the drawing board. Now we're able to accomplish in like an hour, and
but you still need the person.
Pivot.
You
and
still
then
need Grady to do
exactly, and
the
then
work.
he does the full design. And so so I think that's something that, like, if any of my students in digital media, I would be like, absolutely, you should be using AI, like even if it's just to help get your ideas out of your brain and to see it laid out, to be like, okay, this is the direction I want to go in. Like that can be a huge time saver.
Absolutely.
I feel like my old mantra was always, social media can be a force for good. Like I wanted it on a t-shirt, because for so long, and even still, people only think of it as like a negative thing. But I feel like my new one is what you just said. Like AI is a tool, not a threat. Like I need that on a t-shirt now, because like and we have to wrap up. Actually, we've kept you, I think, even longer than we're supposed to.
Oh, I was going to ask Nick if she had any good stories.
Oh, well, okay, you can ask Nikki.
One story. Nikki, give us one story. Ford versus Ferrari, whatever. You've got to have a good one.
We love Ford
anything.
Versus. Yeah, that's that. If someone asked you that question, John, you would like freeze up and have no answer.
I'd be the worst. You have to give me some. I'm terrible. I'm terrible.
Give someone a question like that.
That's like asking me, what do you want to watch tonight? I don't know.
He like panicked. He's like a deer in the headlights.
Okay, I have a quick story. John's probably heard this before. It's about Loving Vincent, which was one of the first films I acquired as a distributor, and I was very green and very new to distribution, and I think that helped me in this case. But we were looking for titles to release that year. Grady, my husband, actually saw a teaser for Loving Vincent, and if you don't know it, it's a hand painted biopic. So every single frame is hand oil painted in the style of Vincent van Gogh. And so for that one, it was just, you watch the teaser and you're like, you're watching art. Like, this is really cool. It's really unique and different. And the head of distribution at the time, she had run a bunch of numbers, and she was like, we're going to be losing money on this investment. We can't put money into it. And I was like, you guys are looking at all of the wrong numbers, because you're looking at comps for a film that cannot be comped. Like, this isn't just adult animation. Like, it's based on IP. You can look online and see the marketing reach. There's millions of people who are not only liking, but they're sharing, they're engaging, they're super excited about this. I'm like, those are the numbers that matter the most. And I told my boss I would put my job on the line for this film. I had never said that before, and I've actually never said it since. But he was like, great. You will move forward after fighting them for a very long time. We'll move forward with the acquisition, but you need to find 1.5 million in P&A so we can release this movie, because I'm not putting another dollar into it beyond the MG. I'm like, sure, not a problem.
P&A is just for those of us.
You said, sure, not a problem.
Yeah.
What's P&A? Explain P&A.
Yeah. So any marketing spend, any
Gotcha.
like the cost of delivering to theaters, all of that to do the release. Yeah, like I said, I was young and naive and I was like, yeah, 1.5 million, we got this. Ended up finding the Bondit guys, Bondit Buffalo8. They came in and lent us the money for the P&A. We released it, the movie, the weekend that I got married.
Oh my God.
And Grady was like, we can be checking box office numbers all weekend. It's okay. Like we don't have to turn our phones off for the
What a
honeymoon.
good husband.
Like I know. I was like, because I need to check. But we ended up and so much of the release strategy was like really grassroots. It was getting these group ambassadors to do group ticket sales. It was doing like paint and sip nights, and it was kind of a really slow build, slow burn. We ended up breaking all kinds of independent box office records on the few screens that we were on. We didn't go super wide. We generated over 7 million in box office. I got to go to the Academy Awards as
Oh,
my
that's
first
right.
year as a distributor. Like it was really cool, and I think it's a great example of we had a system in place of exactly what to do when you're acquiring a film, and sometimes there's just things that they break out of that box and you're like, we have to take a chance on this and we have to look at things a little bit differently. And so I think that has really influenced my approach as a distributor, like just having that experience and having it right out of the gate.
That's a
What a
great
great
story.
story. That's like a story and a recommendation for something to watch, all rolled into one.
That's right.
Exactly.
Well, Nikki, you've been a great guest. Thank you. So I know you're so busy with the kids and work and everything, and it's the middle of winter, and I really appreciate you. We really appreciate you joining us today and taking time for us.
I'm excited to be on it and to watch the podcast blow up. Like I love what you
Well,
guys are doing. You've had some awesome guests so far. I want to keep listening.
thank you. Hopefully, each week we get better, and maybe we will blow up and get really good someday.
I love it.
Thanks, Nikki. All right, Digital Dilemma fans, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Link Media original podcast.